Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Sustainability Talking Live. Now, nature, protecting nature, whose job is it anyway? Now, I've got some fantastic news for myself and for you all, which is that I'm not going to be hosting this today. Sue Bonney is. Sue, you're going to be talking for about 35, 40 minutes. Do you think I have enough time to get to the Maldives and back in that time?
I think it's worth a crack, to be honest.
I'll give it a go. I'll give it a go. Right, well, I'm just about to play some music, and when the music's finished, I'll be gone. So enjoy the show.
So, hello everyone. It's great to be hosting. So, look, I was just catching up on my reading recently, and I came across some research from Oxford Martin School that said that the world's highest consumers are causing up to $5.7 trillion of environmental damage every year. But what was really interesting when I was reading it was that the biggest driver of that wasn't climate change per se, which I think we're all feeling a bit at the moment, but it was actually biodiversity loss. And that, given the size of the numbers and their impact on the geographies, the countries we live in, us, our children, all that sort of stuff, it led me to think, why aren't governments doing more about it? Or actually, since companies are the ones with deep pockets and they're probably causing most of it, why shouldn't they be sort of stepping up and doing the right thing more and as part of their corporate social responsibility, doing something about it? Well, we used to have bees on the roof when I was at KPMG, but I think we're probably talking about a little bit more than that. So hence today's discussion, which Michael's already said, is protecting nature. Whose job is it anyway? And I suppose the subtext is this actually optional, or is it really a strategic imperative for everyone? So I'm joined by three friends of mine who have real insight into this. So Sarah Edwards, who is from UK government-sponsored body Natural England, where she is General Counsel and Head of External Affairs. Hi, Sarah. And Ryan Asher, who is a management consultant at the International Sustainability Consultancy, ERM. Hi, Ryan. Dr. Stephanie Heim, who I'll come to in a minute, is the founder of Little Blue Research, which is an independent consultancy. And what they do is provide technical support for environmental, economics and social impact. So as I say, I'll come to Stephanie in a minute, but I'm going to ask Sarah and Ryan just to basically say hi, I suppose just to check our microphones are working, if nothing else. But in a word, both of you, is this one for governments or should companies be caring more and doing more about nature? So is this public or private? Sarah, I'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. It's both. Private entities need to get on board with this because there are very real risks to their business. But we do need public policy to create impetus and level the playing field. Okay.
And Ryan, what do you think?
Hi, Sue. Hi, everyone. Both as well, but it's infrastructure. So with other infrastructure, we accept that everyone has a role. Governments to set a direction. Business can allocate the capital and lead on delivery. So it's both, but let's not treat it too different.
No. Okay, so similar ground there, but with perhaps different emphasis. So what we'll do is explore that later in the programme. But first, what I'm going to do is come to Stephanie Heim, who I caught up with earlier this week. And I started by asking her the same question. So, Mike, if you're not already on the beach, could you maybe play the video, please? Hi, Stephanie. So, look, given the nature of your business and your clients, I guess I already know the answer to this, but what do you think? Who's responsible for preserving this nature thing? Is it a public sector thing or is it for the private sector?
Well, as you may have guessed, I'm going to say both, and I think it's government responsibility because ultimately we are stewards of the environment for the next generation. So there's that element of protecting the environment so that our children can see it and appreciate it, but it's also really seen as an important topic for citizens. We've seen people galvanise on water pollution and also loss of trees in local areas. But I don't think it's just limited to government. I think private companies have something to do here as well. And it's mainly because our current economic system doesn't necessarily fully recognise the value of these underpinning ecological functions. And those things, if they are lost, they can lead to the loss of many different businesses and services. So they're vulnerable whether they believe it or not.
Okay, and to that last point then, are you seeing companies sort of step up to the plate and take this seriously? What would you say?
So I would say that the last 18 months have been really quite choppy, but the last 6 months of that have started to see companies regain and start putting in place actions to address some of these issues. So from our side, for Little Blue Research, we've worked with a company to look at how the impact of data centres might be spread across different countries and what mitigations might be put in place to manage that. But we've also looked at the task force for nature-related financial disclosures and helping companies start to do assessments to look at where they might be impacting or depending on the environment, where in a way that they haven't necessarily picked up on before. So I think that those are quite positive signs.
Yeah, and I know you're doing a fairly major survey at the moment to sort of test the extent of that activity. Can you just say a little bit more?
So yeah, Little Blue Research, along with Biodiversify, we're running a survey to look at the progress of integrating nature into business decision making, and it's building on a Little Blue Research white paper that was completed in 2024. And what we really want to do is understand whether progress has dropped off, whether it's quietly ticking along in the background, and really get a handle on what companies are doing. And by doing it in this way, where we anonymize the results and look for broad trends, I think we can give people a sort of broad view as to where the industry is going in general. It takes less than 10 minutes to do. And for each response, we're donating £5 to environmental charities that are listed on various websites, up to £1,000 in total. So any help would be greatly appreciated.
Perfect. And I know we're going to share a QR code and a link to allow people watching to take part. And I would encourage people to do that. So how are you seeing things develop from here? I know we've got COP17 coming up. I think it's in Armenia later in the year. Is that driving some activity?
Well, I think it is, because it's an action-orientated COP, and it's going to be the first time that there is a review on how countries are progressing the global biodiversity target. So that in its own right is going to be an interesting discussions. And alongside that, because of the COP, there are lots of other things that are going to be released at the same time. So the IFRS are putting together their voluntary practice statement for nature, and the exposure draft is expected for COP17. And that's important because that voluntary practice statement would be under S1, the General Sustainability Standard, and the UK's adopted that standard, or a version of that standard, for its own jurisdiction. There are 28 other countries adopting that standard. So that practice statement, if nature's material for your company, you'd be expected to follow. that statement. So we're looking forward to that. And also next week, we see the first launch of Nature Positive Pathways. And that's interesting because it's Green Finance Institute, it's government, and they're putting together pathways for what a nature positive economy might look like, and how the first steps of how to get there. And that work I think will be revealed a bit after this this interview recording, but I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Perfect. And look, just I finally, I guess, I know a lot of your work is about helping value the impacts and the dependencies, so that companies can put real value on this. Can you explain how that really helps?
So I guess the easiest way to think about this is with a bit of a case study. So in a nutshell, my team and we helped a company called the Isles of Scilly Nature Company. And we did that by putting together a natural capital account using the new ISO 14054 natural capital accounting. And what we did is essentially project out a future for the Isles of Scilly over 20 years. And we compared with a business as usual case and a case in which we use conservation measures to help restore and essentially manage the ecology on the Isles of Scilly, which are off the coast of Cornwall, just in case viewers don't know. And by doing that, we could highlight the value of those conservation actions, and it really gives a great illustration of where both public money could be used, because this is a national protected landscape, but also the stakeholders who benefit most from that unique environment, which is the tourism industry, it's the farmers on the islands, it's also the water companies have got a stake in that as well. So it's a really interesting project, but highlighting how you could take future action.
Lovely. And this need for collaboration, which I think is sort of threading through the conversation. So look, really interesting talking to you. Lots going on. Fabulous to have that catch up. I suppose just to finish off, I've got to ask you in one word, are you optimistic for the planet, or are you pessimistic?
Okay, so I'm super optimistic, and I have a few different reasons for that. One's the influence of technology. For all the many ills and the sort of the terrible case that's often made, the amazing case is how much faster and how many more complex models we can do in a way that was just not possible before. And I think that is a huge area for optimism, and something that could really help us tackle some of these growing challenges. And I think there's an increased awareness by companies understanding that there is this dependency on the environment, and they want to get a handle on it. They don't want to lose all the benefits from the environment that they receive. And I think those are causes for optimism.
And organisations like yourself helping them with that. So thank you. It's great talking to you, Stephanie. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So back to my live guests. I think Michael's posted the QR code there briefly, and the link. We'll put the link. There's the QR code to do the survey, and the link will be in the chat. So please do take, I think it's less than 10 minutes to complete it, and it will just add to the richness of the findings. So now back to my live guests to get their perspectives, and ideally maybe some conclusions on how this needs to work. So first, Sarah, let's think about the public sector piece then. So tell us a bit more about Natural England, what's your brief, and what are you focusing on at the moment?
Yeah, thank you. So I work for Natural England. So we are a scientific advisor to the UK government on nature. We're also a regulator. We protect sites and species, and a delivery body for nature positive initiatives in England. And right now we're really focusing on the sort of levers we can use to recover ecosystems. And we're doing it under these umbrellas. So we're recovering nature for growth, health and security, because we're quite firm in the belief that thriving nature can sit alongside human endeavour, and it can also make our lives very much better. So we've accepted that healthy ecosystems have a protective effect for people and businesses. But I think one of the things we're really trying to do is draw that data together. And I know Stephanie obviously mentioned her own data work, but a couple of years ago, we introduced a State of Natural Capital in England report. So Stephanie was doing it for the Isles of Scilly. We did it for the whole country of England. And that was really to show government, this is our natural capital. These are the risks to it, and this is what we need to do to mitigate against those risks. We're also doing things that sort of create a bit of a nudge for the private sector. We sit across something called biodiversity net gain, which is where if you're a developer in the construction business, you have to leave a site that you've disturbed net better off for nature than before you I suppose started any work on it. And we're also trying to do things just like kickstart nature-based solutions with government grants and sort of that seed funding that it needs to then be able to be taken over by the private sector. So I think it's fair to say we stand on the intersection of a lot of public and private work.
Lovely. Okay, thank you. We'll come back to pick up on some of that, I think. But so Ryan, you and I were briefly colleagues at KPMG, but now you're with ERM, which will be familiar to many in the audience, but not everyone. So can you just explain a little bit more about what ERM does? I know you talk about boots to boardroom, but tell us a little bit more about that and what aspects you've been focusing on in particular.
Absolutely. So ERM, it's another acronym, but it stands for Environmental Resources Management.
I didn't know that.
There you go. Yeah, I know. Always in there. World's largest sustainability consultancy. Okay, so we work with companies, investors, and governments around the world. And the honest description of the job is helping them turn sustainability challenges into opportunities. And that's really across the planet, across sectors. So why us and what makes the work worth doing? So there's the science and the data, the strategy, translating, taking all of that best-in-class information, translating it into business priorities, and then actually implementing it on the ground. And that last part really matters to this because nature is place-based, has to be addressed where the operations and the supply chain physically are. And you'll hear people say that's the complication over something like carbon. It's not globally fungible. So that's the boots to boardroom idea. So you have the same problem in different guises from a site, to a supply chain, right up to what the CFO is thinking about and dealing with. And joining that up around sustainability in a way that clients get speed and confidence rather than a fragmented answer. Within that, I sit in our nature and water team, which is really global. And my job is helping clients get through the complexity where they depend on nature, where they impact on it, and turning that into risk and the part people often forget, opportunity, because that's where that builds business resilience and durability in this changing world. Mm-hmm. We're proud really to be putting that together, an end-to-end strategy to implementation. And that's from boots to boardroom. We're talking about water, supply chains, biodiversity, climate resilience, global strategies, these big topics that have to be delivered locally, site by site, risk by risk. When we talk about nature and risk and opportunities, I think we are about 10 years behind carbon, but people have certainly moved from saying, what is this? What is nature risk to what do I do about it? Where do I start? So I do think what we're seeing is a market that's going from awareness to implementation.
Perfect. Okay, so I hear from all three of you that this isn't about altruism. This isn't just doing the right thing. It partly is doing the right thing, but this is really something critical to survival, whether that's for our economy or our countries or our businesses or whatever. So it is a strategic imperative, I think. What I would say, and I pick up exactly on what you said at the end there, Ryan, but I do think people are starting to get that or have got that on climate because, so many of us are seeing the tangible impacts of this kind of extreme weather right now, but companies have had to assess and report on the impacts of that for a little while under TCFD and the international standards and the sort of equivalents around the world. But nature, not so much. It's good to hear you, I think, saying that you feel like we're at a bit of a tipping point on that. But how do we kind of accelerate that? How do we get all parties to see that this is a strategic imperative? So Sarah, you talked about, I think you said growth, health, and security. Is that the unlocker?
So yes, so it's a mindset shift. I think it's a mindset shift to seeing that obvious underpinning that maybe we've taken for granted. Stephanie has touched on it, Ryan has touched on it. It is infrastructure. Nature is the infrastructure which underpins the infrastructure that we build. So it creates the oxygen we breathe. It's the flood prevention that stops washing away all the things that we've built. And so when we start to look at it as infrastructure, your mindset shifts. So if I use a kind of parallel, if your business had works or operations which was going to detrimentally affect a railway line, you would be expected to behave differently than what happens now if you cut down a woodland or if you pump sewage into a river. There's a much higher accountability, I think, to society in there. And we've touched on it. We all need that mindset shift because we can't afford not to shift into this. We're getting into quite dangerous territory, and you said that obviously climate is big on people's minds at the moment, but it really is nature as well that's going to cause these massive shifts for us. So beginning of the year, UK government published a global ecosystem assessment, and it basically said that the risk to national security and prosperity from global ecosystem collapse was high. And it was also saying that every critical ecosystem in the world, so the rainforest, the boreal forest, the coral reefs, these huge sort of, lungs of the earth and these important systems, they're all on a pathway to collapse. And if that happens, we are going to experience wilder weather from that, more pandemics, loss of pharmaceutical resources, collapses in food production. There is a long list of terrible things that could occur from that. And then you're going to start seeing workforces moving, and you're going to see markets moving. And that really is, a nature risk to business. But one of the problems that we really have with this is that ecosystems, they work on tipping points. So they don't sort of just collapse in a linear way that we can say, oh yes, in 20 years, this is going to fall apart. We could literally, I think some of them, by 2030, the report was suggesting that we could start to see those tipping points being reached in some areas. And that is very hard to predict. So reducing the human impact on the natural world and restoring some of these ecosystems now is our best bet.
Perfect. Ryan, anything to add?
There's, among sustainability professionals, there's almost an old refrain or hardware we have that this is about doing the right thing. It's the right thing to do, and that's of course true, and there's an imperative we can't lose there, but I think we found it's not moving businesses as fast as what we'd like, and what
it sounds like.
yeah, spot on. I mean, and what we're trying to articulate, we're using these words in resilience and prosperity. We're trying to articulate that nature loss is an operational and financial risk, and put it in a language and quantification that people can understand. I mean, we're talking about two things, from what you just heard. We're talking about stranded assets for nature. We're talking about areas which become uninvestable balance sheet provisions that have that implication, these sorts of things. And then similarly with a climate crisis, what we're seeing is that nature is really almost the supply side of climate adaptation. All the solutions to the problems, I say all the solutions, come from stewarding and protecting of nature. So there's an absolute connection there between our adaptation as a society and as a business. But either way, on the operational and risk point, just to hammer home, here and now, if a factory loses water, that's not a CSR issue. If a crop fails in your supply chain, it's not just CSR. These are operational issues. And that's why we see, nature and climate. Yes, there's sustainability. Yes, there's CSR, but They're now risk, strategy, finance, legal, procurement topics. And there's challenges there, of course. People are understanding traceability and all these sorts of things, but the science is there. Now comes the translation into investment, value at risk, operationalization. It's going to be messy, but messy isn't a reason to wait.
No, it sounds like it's not. So this isn't bees on the roof. This isn't planting a few trees as part of a CSR program. This is essentially infrastructure, to your point, Sarah, with all the kind of associated risks and financial implications that holds. And the topics, Ryan, that you're talking about, these are boardroom topics. These are CEO and boardroom topics, not, as you say, a kind of well-meaning sustainability team. So I can see that starts to get more strategic. So if we're going to encourage organisations to build on this momentum and pick up and do something, what information is available for them to help them build out their strategic response? Sarah?
So I think one of the things we have a challenge with is a lack of specific data. So I spoke about, we don't know when these ecosystems are going to collapse because it doesn't happen in a linear way. Predicting is difficult. We have enough data to recognize that there is an imperative to act, but it's that difficulty in getting businesses and public bodies to recognize that it's an urgent imperative. So I think that is one of the challenges, but I think the data sets are getting better, and I think it is improving all the time. I think, though, I would also say that there's something about, we have this information, but there is a role of regulation to, I think, help require parties to take this information properly into account.
Yeah.
And that will stop less scrupulous actors, I think, trying to make a short-term profit, whereas others are sort of taking this very seriously for their long-term business futures. So I think that it's the data improving and also getting that level playing field with using the data.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right, and the regulation forcing it, that TCFD, I know it's not TCFD anymore, but that really, I saw it live, forcing people to actually start to take these things seriously and trying to quantify it. Ryan, what do you think about this data point, though?
Yeah, it's not perfect. It can be hard to find. I always think from a past career that, no serious business decision is ever made with perfect data. We talk about real options and valuation, and people acquire companies, enter markets, launch products, all with large uncertainty. And this topic, like nature, I don't want it to be held to that much higher of a bar. If we believe that this is really important, perfect data is incredibly helpful, and government smoothing the path is incredibly helpful, but I wouldn't want the absence to encourage procrastination. You mentioned the TCFD. Of course, there is a cousin or a sister or a brother, the TNFD, Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosure. Yeah. I would say the biggest advancement is that is giving this rule set and aligning on this concept of dependencies. You depend on the environment and risks in that articulation. And that's really bringing together, and I think has helped people make this branch in a similar way. But either way, that's where a public and private sector bodies genuinely need each other. Like bodies like Natural England hold brilliant science and data on what to do where, and ideally the private sector can bring the capital and the delivery at scale. So neither side gets there alone, and the win's connecting that public science to private investment. What we try to do at ERM, you mentioned nature-based solutions around implementation, is to understand, one, the quantification of benefit on a site, mitigating a risk, creating an opportunity, and two, what the finance arrangement looks like, either with actors who share a catchment, a sort of area, or what different government bodies mean in terms of incentivizing this. So there's a huge amount of different language sets and groups to bring together to solve the problem here.
So this is a translation piece as well as everything else I'm hearing. But so no excuses. There's enough data to, people do bigger things with or very big things with limited data. So there's enough to get started. But to pick up on this point about investment. So what we absolutely all know is that what matters is capital, whether that's financial capital or whether it's political capital or whatever. And so what's the payback going to be on this stuff, and how do people get confident on that? Ryan, maybe you raised the point. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a question that comes out a huge amount. What's the payback, and not just the payback? What's the payback now?
Yeah.
Next year. What's the return? We'd always pair it, I think, with the second one. What's the cost of not doing it? Nature sometimes, like in insurance, never. The bill arrives at the end when the problem happens. It just shows up as a disruption, higher insurance, a supply shock somewhere else. So that problem does manifest. And a cost of action, certainly we've seen examples, with our clients and our providers where we've quantified essentially pollution risks, yield stabilization, flood risk, and managing there and really proving a IRR, or a net present value. Okay. But again, there's a cost of inaction there. Just one example is regenerative agriculture, maybe a different space, but is getting a lot of probably talk in the UK and around the world.
Yeah.
That there is it's not a panacea, it doesn't fix everything immediately. There's a J curve where yield reduces during a transition, and people have to pay for that, so farmers aren't left in the lurch. But you look what's happened geopolitically with fertilizer prices and shocks, and suddenly the business case does flip. So the people who've invested early to make more resilient systems, less requiring inputs, are the more resilient, lower cost operators. So really, resilience and durability pays off. Can't predict to you the day it does, but this is really the world we live in, and that's natural capital. Really, is putting a value on things that we've treated as free before. What's the true cost of nature to your business? What's the true cost of water to your business? Once that's priced and evidenced, capital allocation and sourcing can start to look very different.
Okay, got it. Sarah, what do you think?
So I think, Ryan obviously has covered the private sector sort of payback issue quite well, but sorry, very well, Ryan. I think let's not forget that governments are some of the biggest consumers in the world. And yes, we can have the problem of shorter political cycles, and when the economies are under strain, it is very hard for these policy shifts to get the traction. That even though they might save a taxpayer billions down the line and save lives, but the thing is, with infrastructure, governments do that. They do take the hit now for the benefit later. It is very in their sort of lexicon, very in their way of operating. So I think for government, maybe that it's not even such a big leap, if just provided you start treating nature as the infrastructure that it is. But I think what we do know is that people across the world are really anxious about biodiversity loss, habitat loss, and there are some immediate paybacks in terms of just health and well-being, in terms of putting these initiatives in, starting them, people seeing that the tide is turning, and then it will snowball. And I think in terms of that almost like psychological piece for humanity, the paybacks will be quite fast if we can start taking some meaningful action now.
Yes, there's a kind of human emotion piece to it as much as the hard capital is sort of what you're saying. Yeah. Look, that's been a really interesting conversation. So thank you to both of you. Thank you to Stephanie. Michael, if we could have one more go at putting up Stephanie's QR code so that people can contribute to the survey, that would be great. Please, as I say, do take time to do that. So I think it is. We have made the case. You have made very clearly the case that this is a strategic imperative. It's important for our preservation, our mental health, as well as investment and business resilience. So they do. I think it does feel clear that governments and the private sector have to collaborate to tackle this, and there's potential cost for not doing it. But also, I'm hearing from you a sense that there is real movement around this. It's not like we're coming from a standing start. So best of luck in all that you're doing to you're part of that. I'm going to finish by asking you each a question, which I asked Stephanie when I spoke to her. So in a word, are you optimistic for our planet or are you pessimistic? Ryan, I'm going to go to you first.
Sue, I'm optimistic. It's the only one we got. Fighting the good fight.
That's what makes you get up on a Monday morning, is it?
Yeah, you got to.
Lovely. And Sarah, what's your thought?
I know we can. This is not a one-word answer. I know we can do it. Next 2-3 years are going to be pivotal.
Yeah. And I'm the most optimistic person on the planet, so I've got to be optimistic, but let's just hope I'm right on this one. So look, thanks very much. It's a really interesting conversation, and let's all keep fighting the fight. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, everybody. Also, by the way, you can click on the link for the survey in the comments section on LinkedIn. And here's the QR code again. One more time.
Perfect.
And thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody watching, everybody else watching, thank you for joining us, and see you next week.